right, welcome back. You know, it's funny. I had a very interesting conversation with a mentor of mine this morning, and he said something. And he said, "If you are afraid to lose, then you won't have the confidence to win." And for me, that just kind of like hit me kind of right between the eyes. And it's just like, we're all competitive. Me and you, I see you day to day. You see me day to day, put in the work. And I think sometimes it's just like there's certain risk factors and hesitation on certain things. But at the same time, we forget, like, I know, at least for me, sometimes I have to remind myself of the vision of what I'm asking for. You
Mhm.
don't swing small and then still want the big hit. And so for me, it's just like, okay, like what are some of the risk factors that I'm taking, trying to, I guess, play small when I want the big hit? I don't know. What's your take on that?
Um, there's so many different angles you can go with it. I'm just right off the bat, I'm thinking of a song. It's an old school song, Switchfoot, and one of the lines, the lyrics from it is when you remember when you were younger and you had everything to lose, meaning you didn't have anything yet. So the world was still like this open like oyster that you could achieve anything. So you have more to lose. But I think as we get older, then it becomes more restrictive. It's like a funnel. Like so instead of seeing the world like this chalkboard that you can write like dry erase boards is like open slate, it actually kind of becomes like this inverted funnel
Yeah.
where you have this tunnel vision and you can only see things along that path. It's like I go back to like we all know people that have their degrees, have a ton of education, but they're not happy with their life. They're not happy with their career. They're not making the money that they want. And it's because, oh, I have this lane and I have to stick within this lane. And then in contrast, I know more multimillionaires that have never stepped foot on a college campus. And it was because they didn't limit themselves to a certain level of thinking that, oh, I can only do this job. They said, I'm going to make it or I'm going to make it. And I think that kind of goes back to that level of thinking. And sometimes it's self-inflicted that we put these restrictions and we put these parameters on ourselves.
I think that comes with like, that comes with experience. And I think risk is relative to the person that's taking it and also the person that's telling them to go for
Mhm.
it. I hear a lot of like coaches and gurus. It's always like everybody should be an entrepreneur. Everybody should go for it, whatever. Now's the time.
No.
And I sit back and I'm thinking to myself, no. I think back to when I first began this game. I honestly, I tell people all the time, it was a little bit of ignorance and a lot of naivete. Like I didn't know what I was actually getting into, and I had mentors that they weren't telling me not to do it. They were saying, hey, like if you do this, this is what's gonna happen,
Mhm.
and it's unavoidable. Like it's part of the game. So if you're willing to go for it, like really go for it. A couple years back when I was running this TV station, and we were interviewing this guy, and this guy said something. He said this equation: S minus M equals D. Suffering without meaning equals death.
Mm.
And that death can come in many forms, whether it's depression, whether it's a little piece of you dying off and stuff. So many people are afraid to sacrifice because they don't know what they're sacrificing for. But if you sacrifice for a meaning, then that means that every day you can get up and you can say, one more day. Let's see what happens at the end of the day.
Mhm.
Let's see what happens if I just get up and go to the gym. What happens if I just make that phone call? What happens if I just
Yeah.
ask for help when I need help? And so I think a lot of people just self inflict suffering on themselves without thinking about what's the outcome.
Yeah, and let's face it, we live in a world that we want to cut out the suffering. And who wants to suffer? Like no one wants to suffer, but it's also an inherent part of, you have sunshine, you have rain, you have day, you have night, you have joy, you have suffering. I mean, those are all of the things part of the human experience. And I mean, that transcends past business. That transcends into who you are developing, who you becoming, who you growing into as an individual. And I'm thinking of a situation, or I'm thinking of a time when a very, very dark place in my life, hurtful place, a cousin of mine passed away at the age of 32. And my grandmother, she had to bury him. And I remember she went over to his house and she was cleaning the house that he was in. She was, just doing some things around there, cleaning up. And in her tears, she was still doing the work. And I just remember just the expression on her face. And she said, "We still have to go on and things have to get done." And I always remember that because it's like even within the suffering, you still have to, just like you said, there has to be meaning to what you do. And it could be in the little things. It doesn't always have to be something amazing and super, revelational, but there's still a work to be done. And I think that's the part that so many times we get short sighted. I'm feeling suffering, it's a bad thing. End game, I stop moving forward or I stop striving. But it's within the suffering, I got to realize that I got to live to fight again another day. I got to pick up my sword. I got to attack my demons. I got to attack my enemies, whatever it is in front of me, and work towards that next goal, that next
Yes.
step.
Yes, and I think honestly, like there's been times when I'm just going at it and I'm just like battling and everybody else, the perspective outside is like, oh my god, you're up, you're winning, but it's like
Mhm.
you're going through some things and you're battling, and then right when you're about to turn the corner and about to have a light of day, that's when the victory comes. But a lot of times or whatever, you don't know that the victory's coming.
Mhm.
You just think to yourself like, okay, like I'm on my last leg, like I need to crawl. Anybody listening to this, if you gotta crawl to the finish line, crawl to the finish line.
Mhm.
Just finish. Just finish, just so you can make it to the next day.
Mhm.
Even you don't need to run and have like a pure defined victory or whatever. Sometimes wins are ugly. Like
Mhm.
just take the ugly win. And that's
Mhm.
some things that I've had to learn too. Is like you gotta take the ugly win.
Right.
Period.
And another thing to that is, how do you define your wins? Like, what are your wins? Some days, I just make it home. I am not battling through just traffic, but people. I mean, all the frustration that we got to deal in this world. I mean, forget even looking at world politics and social media and the news, just the things that we have to deal with on a day to day basis. And I would say the second for me, I cross that threshold, open my door, walk in, and my kids run up and they hug me. Like for me, that's my win. That's my Super Bowl. I'm never gonna throw a touchdown like Brady in the Super Bowl, but for me, it's getting home, my kids running up to me, "Daddy, you're home," arms around me. That's my win. There's a lot of other wins that I'm
Yeah.
seeking, but that for me, that's that victory moment, and I achieved it in that day and in that moment.
I think too, it comes down to like what are your metrics for success overall? You know, do you really need to hit everything, or do you need to just hit a few core things? You know, one of my things that I do, and on my whiteboard in my home office, like I have this thing that's right. I have these crowns and stuff like that. Okay, like did I earn my crown today? Like,
Hmm.
did I? Sometimes I'll be honest with myself. I will literally corner in a little corner of the crown because I'm just like, you didn't do it today. Like
So
you didn't show up fully.
explain to the people out there, like, what is this crown system for you?
I think at the end of the day, look, you are the king or queen of your own lives and your own kingdom.
Mhm.
And you have to realize where you are in the growth of your actual kingdom. Because you heard me tell it a couple weeks ago. Your throne is your position of power, and a lot of times we are stepping off of our throne because we're distracted. When you step off of that throne, you're still a king, you're still a queen, but you have to understand that you are in danger from distractions, from people, from other things, because you're
Mhm.
not fully in the seat of vision. You're not fully in the seat of control, because a lot of times when you leave that throne, you're alleviating your position of power and authority to outside things. So when you leave your throne, just because you're distracted, or sometimes you have to step down into a position where you have to get it out the mud. You have to do what you need to do, whatever. But remember that where your position is. I had a mentor that told me is like, always, whenever you get distracted, remember what you were doing prior, because a lot of times that is what you should be doing. What's the
Mhm.
primary focus? Like, where are you at? You see a lot of companies go down, a lot of people go down too, because they forget the vision.
Mhm.
You can forget the vision, and then next thing you know, you're distracted overall. I
Mhm.
remember back when I was in high school, right? And I was a wrestler in high school, and this is right before league championships and all this stuff, right? And this is my Rocky story, so lean in. Um,
Mhm.
so I cut weight that day, and I was wearing a sauna suit. I think that day I'd ran about like 13 miles, and I ran to the back of the hills up in by Cal State San Bernardino. So those are not familiar. Cal State San Bernardino got some hills in the back of it,
Mhm.
and I ran up there, and I ran to the top of it, and I had to go to practice, right? And those that are not familiar with wrestling or whatever, like a lot of times your spot can be challenged. Somebody can challenge your spot for whether you're varsity or not. Like a JV can challenge your spot. And so for me, so that day after I got done cutting weight, 13 miles, I had to go to practice to go weigh in. And the coach is like, oh, such and such wants to challenge you for your spot. And I'm just like, dude, I just cut weight. Like, keep in mind, like league championships or like league, it was just like, it was a couple hours away. I'm just like, there's no way I'm going to make it through this challenge and still
Mhm.
have the energy to go do what I need to do. And so this is where that ugly win comes in play. I was so focused on making sure that I got a good place in league that literally what I did was I pinned the guy in less than a minute. And then the assistant coach was like, oh, such and such wants to challenge you too. I'm like, two challenges? Like, are you for real? Like, I am tired. like, like I
Mhm.
thought the first one was, I mean, we were scrambling on the floor. Like we were going at it. And the coach was like, let him, because we had one of those old school coaches, so he didn't care. Coach Jesse, you know who you are.
Mhm.
So what ends up happening is, so the guy challenged me again. I pinned him in less than 30 seconds, stacked him on his neck. And for me, that was that ugly win. But I was so focused on the vision, I didn't care what was in my way or what was going on in my body. I was just like, I just got to get through this.
Mhm.
And so for me, that's like an example of like just focusing on your overall vision. But going back to the crowns, it's like every day, like, are you building your kingdom and did you earn your crown?
Mhm.
And so that's just an example of that.
It's building those wins.
Oh yeah.
It's building those win moments, and one of the things that you mentioned too, and for those of you that didn't catch it, was not only being in your position as a king or a queen, but recognizing not to step out of your position and making yourself vulnerable. So for like one, in that situation in your wrestling decision, you could have not stepped up to the challenge. A king always rises to the and a queen always rises to the challenge, right? So you, when you were called out, when your position was called to test, you fought for it. And I think a lot of times people also forget stepping into your place of position as a king or queen also requires something. It requires action of you. And the other
Yes.
part with that is knowing when not to take action. And and I'll bring up a recent scene that I think we all know about, like the Chris Rock, Will Smith situation. And we had a long deep discussion on this one. You like either one or dislike either one of them. They are both very powerful, very very powerful
Yeah.
men, very rich men. But the problem what Will Smith did was he took himself out of his power position,
Yep.
and he acted out of emotion, he acted out of anger. And so many times you see people, whether it's that have influence, that have power, that have money, they let emotion get the best of them, and they feel they have to act, where that was a situation he could have handled that 20 different ways other than
You
that.
either master your emotions or you become a slave to it.
And I think that's the challenge for I think each and every person listening, whether you're working at Subway making $15 an hour, or whether you're the CEO of a company making 15 million a year, is knowing when I'm put in this situation. Do I need to step up, and when do I step up, and also when do I have to have control over my emotions, and just sit where I'm at and not move out of that seat, not move out of that position. Because there's a saying, and Garrett, Garrett White, he always speaks on this. Many men and a lot of people that have reached a certain level of power and influence, it's either boredom or burnout. And so sometimes people feel that, okay, they're just burned out, so they don't take the effort, or they're bored,
Yeah.
so they step out of that power position. And then, whether it's drugs, alcohol, all the different vices that we can get ourselves caught up in, and they forget, I need to stay in my power position. And I think that's a really key point that I think every one of us needs to realize. If you're going to maintain your position and continue to grow, you also need to recognize there's times I need to stand firm, and there's also times I need to stand up.
And it's recognizing what's happening while you're sacrificing. That's the other thing. It's just like, so while you're sacrificing and you've identified your meaning for that sacrifice, you have to realize that that discomfort that you're feeling during that sacrifice season, that's just your old self dying to a greater purpose. So really, your body and your mind is mourning who you used to be in order
Mhm,
for it to welcome who you will become. And so if you understand that, then I think you can get through it. Just so like, okay, every day I'm getting stronger, I'm getting stronger, I'm getting stronger, whatever.
mhm,
But my body's mourning who I used to be. And so I think once you understand that, you can find peace. Like there's peace in the chaos.
mhm.
There is.
It's when I had a meeting with a very powerful business lady. She's had multi-million dollar businesses, and it was interesting because she was kind of reflecting to me a time when she had the multi-million dollar house, the cars, and everything else, but her marriage was falling apart. And from the outside, it looked like she was in a place of
Yeah.
power. And now she's went through the divorce, sold off a lot of those things, still in build mode again, but she's at a much greater level of peace. And it's so interesting that how right now in society we're every influencer and every major post is telling us, okay, strive for this, but it's still giving you that impression that you need to have this or you need to attain this to give yourself validation, to feel in a place where I feel good about myself. When in actuality, I mean, and I got to speak to whoever is out there listening to this. I mean, if you're driving in a $2,000 car, or you don't even have a car, if you're living, in grandma's basement, realize your value, and also realize your potential, and realize you never step into your full position while you're walking on this earth. Like, it's always a progression. I haven't hit it yet, you haven't hit it yet, and we're always still growing, we're still stretching and becoming that person that we're called to be. But it's got to start from a place of saying, it's not reflective of my bank account, it's not reflective of the title that that's on in front of the door. It's more of a reflection of the value that I see within myself, and knowing that I am called to something greater. I am called to a position of greater destiny than this, and I'm willing to go through those pain points. I am accepting that I will have those struggles, like you said, those moments of, I don't know if I can go through this. But that's where you gain that confidence, and that's when you, like you said, you start building on that, and that's when you have those wrestling moments, right? And then I don't say the glory happens, but then you start building on it, and you start getting those wins and those victories, and that's when you start putting that in deep in within yourself of like, yes, I can get through this.
I'm telling you. And then one of my favorite quotes is, a king gets his crown one or two ways, by birthright or by war. And the reality is that a
Mhm,
king prepares his land first. But when he prepares his land, it's about positioning. It's always about positioning. No matter where a kingdom was or whatever, it was about positioning. Where is it positioned at? It's going to be positioned by resources. It's going to be positioned by the advantage if attack comes. It's all about positioning, and so many people forget about that. So, like in
mhm,
your times of pain, your times of hurt, or whatever it is, who's around you to help you rebuild? Who's around you to
mhm,
help catch you? Who has your back when you don't even know that they have their back, whatever, but
mhm,
they're the quiet destiny helpers in your life, whatever. And so I
mhm,
think that, I mean, life's always about positioning. And so it's just like you get into your pit,
mhm.
who's there with their arms stretched out, say, hey, let me help you out. Let me help you get out here quicker. I mean, at the end of the day, you got to do the work yourself, but you can only go so far.
So let me ask you this, and we'll wrap up with this question is, so I know much of your story. For those that listen to
Mhm.
you've had some low moments. So when you were at that pit, when you were at that low resource moment, what were the things that helped you most when you didn't have
Mm.
resources? What were the resources that you had that got you out of it?
Oh, man. See, here's the thing. It's always reoccurring because you're building on top of them. It was here's the thing, like, we all have wins, but I think a lot of times the people around you, they'll see the shadows of like former wins, and so they'll kind of, their energy and their voices will kind of help you um move forward in a way, because sometimes when you're in those situations and stuff, you can't really see who you really are. Everybody's like, oh yeah, only you can see your greatness and stuff. No, that's not true. And it's just like sometimes your vision is impaired because you just took a hit. And so you got to be able to look out and really hear what the people around you is saying about you, like the truth about yourself. Like, who am I to you? Like when you look at me, like, and me, so it's just like, what do you see that I could be doing better? Who do
Mhm.
you believe that I am? I remember one time joking around with my niece, and she says, Uncle Rashid, you're weird. And I said, I was like, Anaya, why am I weird? She's like, I don't know. It's just like the way that you talk to people, and the way that you just really want to know who these people are, and you just sit there and you
Mhm.
just listen, and then you just give them. It's like you just it's like she's like she says, it sounds you. People think that you always want to be right, but you don't. You just sit there and you watch people and you allow things to play out. You never intervene when people are doing things wrong. You just sit there and take it, because it's like she was telling me, just like, you have a true interest in the betterment of people. And I'll tell myself, little girl, 13. What do you know?
Mhm.
But I had to take that and I really had to absorb it. And I was just like, she just gave me all these praises because of her perspective of
Mhm.
me. So it's stuff like that. God will always send people to whisper to you who you
Mhm.
are. You ask God, who do you if you ask God, who am I? Like, who am I to you? He'll send somebody to whisper in your ear exactly who you are.
Mhm.
And so,
And that don't need a special title. That doesn't need any money in the bank. That just needs you just being reflective and just being open to hearing and listening. So with that being said, we hope you guys got a lot out of this episode. I know we always do. So we appreciate you guys listening. We love you, and definitely feel free to keep on listening. Like us, follow us. Talk to you soon.